So, good evening, students. Today we are going to continue with the environmental sciences subject with the topics related to ecotourism, responsible tourism, voluntary tourism, community-based tourism, and pro-poor tourism. Students, since we all are talking about environmental sciences, especially into the quest of understanding tourism. So in this particular session, we are we will talk about different types of tourism which are mainly related to environmental orientation of tourism type. So without any delay, let us proceed further. First of all, ecotourism. We need to understand what is ecotourism. One of the most popular definition by TIES, that is TIES, that is the International Ecotourism Society or Ecotourism Society of the international reputation. They had defined ecotourism as the responsible travel to nature area which conserves the environment and sustain the well-being of local people. So this is the this is an official definition by TIES, that is the International Ecotourism Society. According to their definition, it is what a responsible travel which is there into the areas of or specific areas of the nature or natural surroundings which conserves the environment and sustain the well-being of local people. So here in this definition, we are concentrating with three important things or three major things. One is the responsible travel into the natural areas which conserves the environment and sustain the well-being of local people. So it is all about sustaining the well-being of local people, and the environment is the key aspect. Now, if we could generalize this definition, then we shall be able to understand the important aspect related to it, that anything or any travel which is more responsible into the natural surroundings, which usually conserves about the sustainability aspect, about the environment, and then the interest of the local people, is to be called as the ecotourism. Let us proceed further with this discussion. Generally, ecotourism refers to mainly two criteria. These are, one is environmentally responsible and social and culturally responsible, or responsibility of the ecotourism in terms of the environment, number one, number two, the society, and then cultural responsibility for cultural well-being and for the social well-being along with the environmental well-being by the name of tourism or tourism related actions. Let us try to take a definition, because since these are the types to be discussed by the name of environmental phenomena, we will talk about the certain other definitions related to ecotourism. This is the definition of IUCN given in the year of 1996. IUCN is definitely an international organization, International Union for Conservation of Nature, which we have already discussed in the several topics in the environmental sciences and the concerned tourism. So according to them, ecotourism is environmentally responsible travel. Number two, it is visit of relatively undisturbed natural areas. The people, those are going to the places where is less disturbance is there, or people are going to create the less disturbance to the area. That is also in principle the idea of ecotourism is all about. In order to enjoy and appreciate nature, this is the formal duty of an ecotourist, where they would not only enjoy and appreciate the nature, but they also refer its cultural featuring. They promotes the conservation related to the destination or places. They will talk about the negative, or it will talk about the less negative impact on the scenarios. Whenever we keep talking about less environmental effect, that meant for whenever we are keep on talking about environmental opportunities, environment needs to be sustained. In our earlier sessions, mainly in the environmental impact of tourism, we had talked about that any act or any such act of tourism, because tourism is an action, by the way, and by the name of ecotourism, whenever we are adding prefix to it, we are talking about a sum total of phenomena of tourism, which not only have the limited negative impacts but also have the beneficial activities in terms of society, in terms of economy, in terms of involvement of local population. So it is the all sum of the ecotourism according to IUCN. We will talk about the four core principles of ecotourism. They are: number one, to minimize negative impact, as we have talked about in the previous definition of IUCN. Then it is to talk about the involvement of local stakeholders in all processes. Now, these all processes are very wide processes as a whole. Process meant for whenever we are talking about tourism, tourism to be understood as a process of movement of people from one place to another. And that is needs to be a temporary movement. Within this movement, there is one area that is called the supply aspect, and one area may be called up as the demand aspect. This may be understood in a different model, or the geospatial model of tourism that we have talked about in the earlier classes of yours, or in the fundamental of tourism or tourism related conceptual understanding of this subject, will let us know that any process that here what we are talking about into the quest of ecotourism, it is the entire momentum of the mankind for particular process or the processes, likewise whatever we are talking here. So these are two. We talked about such involvement where the local stakeholders are nobody but are the local people, the community, those have the direct or indirect involvement into the quest of tourism. If we talk about the environmental orientation or ecotourism orientation of the destination, that is also the same for the particular place or the area. If we talk about the third principle that talks about benefits for local communities and nature conservation, there are two obligations to be complete. Whenever we talk about nature conservation, this is what the communities benefit, one end. On the contrary, if we talk about the benefit of local community by conserving nature, or conserving natural surrounding, flora, fauna, wild animal, and other species, etc. It is not only have the environmental benefit, but to have the reciprocal economical and socio-cultural benefits also. So these benefits needs to be catered and need to be cared for the people. Those are mainly the local people. They may be the different communities, they may be the people, those are the habitant, they may be the people, those are the part and parcel of tourism industry, or the people those are not having direct involvement into the tourism process, but they are going to eventually be a stakeholder. Last but not the least, it is very important and such an overwhelming part into it, that is public awareness and education is the must. Whenever we are talking about key tourism scenarios in the country, we need to understand, or we need to thought about that environment needs to be educated. Environment needs to be preserved. For the preservation of environment, local people or public awareness and education, mass education needs to be demonstrated. So anything that in the form of tourism that we are encompassing, that needs to be based on public awareness and education. Whenever we talk about those 4 principles, we'll talk about them specifically. Minimizing negative impact by preservation of ecological carrying capacity. Whenever we talk about minimizing negative impact, friends, here the negative impacts are greater once we are not following the carrying capacity. Rather, they are going to have a lot of negative impact from the society. On the contrary, ecological balance are the substantial balance in terms of environment and environmental scenarios, which makes a lot of important changes. For example, if we are talking about the commencement of people from one area to the different area, that is a process of tourism by the name of act of tourism. As an actor tourist comes at a place and he or she will demonstrate by the name of some ecological place or some environmental area. This area, by the end of the tourism activity, we need to ensure ecological balance. That meant for the resources, the uh, the vegetation habitat must not be there in the threat. That needs to be have a balance into it. Next is to ensure the, allow me a minute. Next is to ensuring acceptance of tourism development. We need to ensure the development of tourism at the stake of the environmental conservation only. Ensure there should not be the development which is going to hamper the sustainability aspect. Next is environmental friendly transport alternative also needs to be there. Involvement of local stakeholders in all processes includes local communities. It talks about just and human working opportunities for local people. As much as we talk about the opportunities for the local people needs to be ensured, as we have already discussed. Benefits for local communities and nature conservation, economic benefits, alternate employment, income opportunities, directing revenues to conservation and management of natural and protected areas, as we have already discussed by the discussion of the point that we have already talked about. Public awareness and education is to increase awareness towards conservation of nature and cultural assets. Friends, nothing can be ensured the conservation or the preservation of the resources until unless we are going to talk about the specific interest of the people, common people, for preserving the natural environment. For that, a proper awareness campaign, proper education in the masses is required. And therefore, people needs to be educated in that particular direction, and then they will keep on updating their particular scenarios. Education of local people and stakeholders on the importance of conservation required, and conservation is an ongoing process, so as the education in the modern societies. We'll talk about ecotourism and sustainable tourism. What is the thin line? Ecotourism can be considered as a subset of sustainable tourism. Whenever we are talking about tourism, tourism is a set of umbrella, or sustainable tourism as a set of umbrella by which the ecotourism can accommodate as a subset of it. So we talk about ecotourism can be considered as a subset of sustainable tourism and nature tourism because it represents the sustainable way of traveling in natural areas. Sustainability meant for minimum impact or minimum negative impact on environment, or to maximize the growth and rejuvenation of the destination. Now we have keep moving to the talking about the next topic of the session, that is responsible tourism. So what is responsible tourism all about? Now we need to understand ecotourism is a way of responsible travel. On the contrary, responsible tourism was defined in in first of its kind of word being identified in Cape Town in 2002, along with the World Summit on Sustainable Development. As in continuation of the last video that we had talked about last month for the concerned video, the environmental conventions that we have talked about, referring that video where that we had talked about in the year of 2002, the World Summit on Sustainable Development, the definition, the Cape Town Declaration is now widely accepted and was being adopted by World Travel Market in 2007 for World Responsible Tourism Day. So whenever we're talking about responsible tourism, the idea was initiated in the year of 2002 and the World Travel Market in 2007. Now, responsible tourism is making places for people, better places for people to live in, the better places for visit. Responsible tourism requires the operators, hoteliers, government, local people and tourists take responsibility, take actions to make tourism more sustainable. Let us, in very simple words, we can talk about this students. Responsible tourism is a kind of act by the people. Those are the tourists, those are the operators, those are the service providers. They may be the suppliers, or they may be the demand side called the tourist. Both of them or each of them at every pace or at every level, they need to ensure their action in a responsible manner. I thought in the fundamental of tourism, we understand that tourism is the process of, or tourism is the action confined by the tourist, or tourist is a person who is mainly the person who talks about the different tourism activities at the place. So whenever we talk about the responsible tourism is definitely a kind of uh, act which one meant for the policymakers, the industry people by the name of hotelier, by the name of travel agent, tour operators, by the name of the whole fraternity, by the name of tourists itself, by the name of guide, by the name of driver. Everyone needs to act responsibly once you are talking about your actions. So it's responsibility in terms of action, in terms of tourism, that is called responsible tourism. There are certain characteristics of responsible tourism that we'll talk about very on a very specific pace. One is to minimize negative economic, environmental, and social impact. So anything that we are talking about in terms of the impact, negative impact, environment, ecology, and the social impacts, that needs to be negativized by the name of, or by the name of the responsible tourism. Then to generate greater or larger economic benefit for local people and to enhance well-being of the communities by improving working conditions. There are two things to be talked about. At one end, we are talking about the benefit of the local people. On the contrary, we are talking about the well-being of the local communities by improving their working conditions. So there should be the cohesiveness, there should be the proper coordination in between the people and the tourist community. Even the local community, those are going to be benefited, or that needs to be benefited at the end. It involves all people in decision that affects their lives and life changes. Any act which is going of tourism is going to affect the people. Let me give you any example. Suppose we are talking about a destination or a place where the tourists are going to be there, and by the name of tourist visit, people visiting that place may affect the destination. So whatever the positive or negative effect we may visualize, that is because of positivity of the tourism. And if we are talking about correcting our actions which may minimize our negative impacts may have some positive or drastic positive impacts on the local people, the community, the authorities, and then even the single individual also. It provides more enjoyable experience for tourists, though more meaningful connections with local people. There are not always have got certain positive relationships. Whenever we talk about, there's a term in tourism called host and guest relationship. So whenever we talk about responsible tourism, we need to act responsibly, being as a tourist also, guest also, or even as a host also. So whenever as a host or guest we have got a mutual relativity, mutual respect for each other, then only we can ensure the safeguard for the tourism or the proximity of the tourism or the tourist for everywhere. It provides understanding local, greater understanding to the social, cultural, environmental aspect of the local to the tourist. It may provide an access to for people with disabilities and disadvantage. So responsible tourism, we need to be more ethically. We need to be more associated with in terms of our own design for the upliftment of the people or their gradual success for their positive attitude towards the local people or the community or the environment as a whole. It is culturally sensitive, endangered respect between tourist and host, and builds local pride and confidence. So this is all about those characteristics of responsible tourism or regime of responsible tourism that we have talked about. Now we'll talk about next topic, which is very important, volunteer tourism. As an introduction of this, we can state volunteer tourism is form of travel that has become very increasingly popular in modern society, and it seems the trend of growing along with its appearance in tourism academia. It is and where it is and where it does it fit an brand tourism industry. In that in this past we'll propose to have a comprehensive aspect of understanding about volunteer tourism. It may be explained as a term volunteer. So volunteer tourism meant for a self-explanation in terms of a tourist who is volunteer to visit a specific destination for the sake of benefit of the society, economy, and the culture. So this is what the concept behind the volunteer tourism. The travelers, those are visiting the place under the volunteer tourism, they are mainly the academicians. They are the traveler of definite reputations of different interests, and they are mainly the volunteers. So volunteer tourism may be defined in general. Volunteering is an integral part of society, and with the traveling become more accessible, volunteer have begun an appear in tourism industry. In brief, volunteer tourism is a type of tourism where an individual will travel abroad to a destination that is predominantly considered undeveloped. So volunteering yourself to visit a place which is not been developed like anything. This is what the whole idea behind volunteer tourism. Why there's a term called volunteer? Someone would like to volunteer the as a tourist or as a traveler to visit that place because the place is such undeveloped kind, and therefore we need to provide an opportunity or a scope for supporting the needs of it. And when we use the phrase those in need, which is expressed a lot of volunteering, we refer to those who are surrounded by extreme poverty, do not have the adequate food or education or healthcare, and all such things may be ensured once we are talking about tourism at particular places. So tourism may ensure such infrastructure at such places by the name of volunteer tourism. So volunteer tourism as new term being identified in the more new prospect of tourism academia. What is community-based tourism? Community-based tourism is a travel to local indigenous communities that have invited outsiders to experience their customs, food, lifestyles, and set of beliefs. In terms of India or in terms of a place, we talk about or referring any community which we are referring, we are providing the all sort of experience related to community, and therefore we are favoring the community. So this is community-based tourism's principal idea is all about. These communities manage both the impacts and the negatives of this tourism, strengthening self-governance, economic alternatives, and traditional ways of progress. Now we'll talk about the characteristics of community-based tourism. Before commencing to the characteristics of the community-based tourism, we need to elaborate what all we talk about, what all we are understanding by the term community-based tourism. Any form of tourism or any act of tourism may be considered as community-based tourism whenever the whole sum of idea is community-based, and that the centrifugal tendency of travel or tourism is quite community-centric. And therefore, we are going to talk about local people's contribution into the wholesome of tourism process, their few food, their traditions, their art, their craft, and meaningfully upgrading their own areas for the development of tourism. By the name of community-based tourism, we are developing their core requirements and facilitating them while helping by the different aids. And moving to the community-based tourism to proper tourism, this has got the momentum of tourism industry or tourism classification by the tourism academia is all about. Let us talk about certain characteristics placed as per this PPT. These key characteristics of community-based tourism are: one is the indigenous leadership. Whenever we talk about the community-based tourism is managed by indigenous communities. Those are the group of people, and these groups have certain leaders or certain heads, or maybe called up as community head or family heads. This means the community assumes collective responsibility for all aspects of your stay, including accommodations, internal travel, local food, and cultural activities, etc. So this is what the wholesome of idea related to the community is all about. Whenever we talk about the community-based tourism is within the community, followed by the community norms in terms of stay, in terms of accommodation, their travel and food and cultural activities as a tourist or as a actor or performer. Tourist is, by the way, the actor according to one of the definition, whenever he or she is going to perform certain actions at a place. Communities reap the benefits from tourism revenues, making community-based tourism a sustainable alternative to many travel organizations which may offer the benefits to the local people at the last. Through community-based travel, collective well-being is valued and the corporate individual profit may also be ensured. The second important characteristics of community-based tourism is sustainability. Anything or everything that we are talking about, whether it is talking about the sustaining the environment or sustaining the values or sustaining the culture, community will be accommodate us as many people they are able to. They must not been forced to accommodate everyone or each one of us. There is a certain, or there are certain capacity areas for and certain anthropological prospect for these certain communities that we need to respect. Keeping in mind long terms of sustainability and avoiding unnecessary strain on their own resources, meals generally draw on local agriculture, and communities will not take on more guests, and their hosting and energy resources can affect supportively. So whenever we talk about we have a limited amount of capacity, then we must do within that. Otherwise, there will be a local community loss, because whatever the profitability, whatever the benefits they are going to ensure, they may have the threat rather. Aside from physical resources, revenue from community-based travel helps to sustain indigenous culture and traditions. Whenever we talk about tourism, tourism is to selling the culture also. And nowadays, indigenous culture needs to be propagated so that more such favorable tourists may be there with the sustainable environment, and then they can ensure the tourism viability of such places of the communities. Cultural immersion is required whenever we are talking about the community-based tourism. The cultural immersion into the different aspects related to lodging, cuisining, activities, and certain areas of actions related to the sightseeing or the showcasing of demonstration of the different ethnic aspects related to their culture needs to be ensured. What is pro-poor tourism? As we have talked about recently in our this own video, that we are moving from community sustainable tourism to the community-based tourism, and then to slowly to the pro-poor tourism. So pro-poor tourism as to define as that generates net benefit for the poorer. Anything or everything as a set of tourism may be called even the community-based tourism. Certain thing needs to benefit the poorer masses. That is called pro-poor tourism. Benefit may be economic, but they may also be social and environmental or cultural. Whenever we are keep on talking about the economical benefit, they need not to be much related with only having money or having employment or having the growth rate or changing their per capita income or changing their buying capacity or developing their human development index, followed by some social, environmental and cultural growth also. So that needs to be ensured. The definition says nothing about the relative distribution of benefit of tourism. In tourism, there is no such things, or in specific tourisms types, there's no specific saying about the distribution of benefits. I know, or we know as an academician or as a tourism fraternity or tourism students, that benefits are there, but who is having the maximum exposure of the benefits being provided or being availed by from one person to another person. So therefore, as long as poor people reap the net benefits, tourism can be classified as pro-poor. Even if richer people benefit more than poor people, that is also okay. But at the end, we need to have or ensure that the most poor people are going to be benefited. That is called pro-poor tourism. Implementation of pro-poor tourism strategies. How do we need to implement that? That is very important, and that is why is the area to make the benefit to the common people or people those are in need. One is expanding business opportunity for the poor. It is not possible, or it is almost impossible for making every poor masses being benefited by tourism or any sort of tourism that even called the pro-poor tourism, until unless we are not segregating or expanding the business opportunity for poorest. Therefore, small enterprises, particularly the informal sector, there are certain sectors in the societies which are being driven by the poorer masses. For example, we talk about tourists. Any tourist comes, at least 8 or 9 people will get jobs, right? This is what the fundamental principle of the tourism. Whenever a traveler keep moving from one place to another, there should be a benefit to the people those are in need. Therefore, certain small enterprises, particularly in the informal sector, like rickshaw puller, like boatmen, or the local cuisine, the people those are doing the handicraft work, or even the laborers, those are not there in the organized sector, that needs to be benefited. Next is to expanding employment opportunities for poor. That needs to be strengthened by like anything, so that they may be upgrade their opportunities. So if you are talking about any economical cycle, into that particular economic cycle, there should be certain periphery for the people. Those are the common masses. Must not be limited, rather it needs to be expanded to the international standards or the horizons for the benefit of the others. It needs to be enhanced collective benefits. Collective community income from tourism can be new source of income and can spread benefit well beyond the direct earners. That is to be deployed to the every level, and that is the responsibility of trade itself, trade barriers itself, and of course the responsibility of the authorities by the name of different institutions, of course the government also. Last topic for the discussion. After this, we'll be able to fully complete certain one unit that this topic belongs to. STEP, that is called Sustainable Tourism Eliminating Poverty. So the sustainable tourism that eliminating poverty, any form of tourism, the goodness of the tourism which ensures two things. One is the sustaining the tourism or environment and eliminating the poverty. So anything as a program of the welfare for the masses and the tourism, or the poorer masses or the tourism, those are eliminating their poverty state, or they're upgrading their human development index by the name of certain development programs assigned by United Nations by the name of UNWTO also. They are to ensure the status of the poverty. People needs to be ensure their livelihood level, their opportunity, that is called Jeevan Ki Pratyasha, or proximity of life needs to be improved, and that can be improved if the initiatives like STEP, that is according to WTO, this initiative towards the welfare of poor people and to ensure the sustainability as a well-being of the people along with the or the poorer people along with the tourism as a fraternity. जब tourism नहीं रहेगा तो शायद हम poverty को elevate नहीं कर पाएंगे. So we need to sustain with the environment, with the resources, so that the tourism can be occurred. Next, or the last one is we need to understand it's an initiative of United Nations World Tourism Organization with conjunction of UNWTO, that is United Nations program with the. There are two UNWTO, United Nations World Trade Organization, and then here conjunction was UNWTO, that is United Nations World Tourism Organization, under STEP, Sustainable Tourism Eliminating Poverty Foundation. So these are certain programs established by United Nations under both UNWTO and WTO, World Tourism and Organization, Trade Organization, for the welfare of the poorer masses for the ensurement of their upgradation. So with this session today, we have completed our one of the unit, which I shall be able to let you know after the completing this video. We have completed more syllabus and more relevant talk that we have talked about. We have covered the different aspect related to tourism, and this gives us an idea how to ensure the proper safety of the tourism. So thank you so much. Good night.